much to all of you for coming to our first seminar of 2019, in which we are very lucky to welcome Professor Alex Ruyter, who is currently a visiting fellow at RMIT, which is why we're so lucky to have him in town. But he's actually a professor at Birmingham City University and is the director of the Centre for Brexit Studies, so he is probably a better place than almost anyone at this point to tell us what is going on. The numbers of people we have here today, the things that have happened to the full Labour Party overnight, underline just how important the topic this is and the enormity of the crisis that the UK is following, or is facing in a month and a half now, by March 29th. So I won't take up any more of your time. Alex is going to talk about public attitudes to Brexit. He's been doing focus groups. This is really cool because we're actually going to hear about what all these people that we keep talking about and reading about, what these people actually think. So it's a really cool opportunity. Alex can talk for about 30 minutes and then we'll open the floor to questions. So please join me in thanking Alex.
Should I stand up?
That's up to you.
Yeah,
Can these
right.
people see?
Can you?
Are we okay in Geelong?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yep.
Very good. Thanks for that. Yes, maybe I should sit down. I don't know. There we go. Gotcha. That's great. As you can tell by my accent, I'm not from England. Although some people in this country think I'm English, I don't know why. Can you all hear me? Yeah, you can hear me there, it'll be fine. Yes, I'm from this country. I'm originally from Geelong. So, I did my undergraduate at Deakin. So I'm a Deakin alumnus. I did it in, what it's called now, but it was a science faculty back then, probably still is. It was in maths and economics and the evolutionary journeys that took place from there, and I ended up in a business school environment. And beyond that, in my current role for the last 2 years in a university research centre. So I've been in the UK for 20 years now. I've spent about 11 of those years in Birmingham and a couple of institutions, of course, this one for the last 3 years. And in between that, I spent in Scotland, a couple of places in Glasgow. My wife is Scottish, so no, that isn't important for the subtext of this conversation. It's Scottish. You want to talk about identity? There's a good starting point. So yes, we established this little research unit. It's only a small research unit actually, there are 3 of us full-time, but it was endowed by the university as a sort of strategic research centre, one that they'd like to grow some presence in. And its subject area really covers mainly those of business, social sciences, law, so politics, international relations. My own background is more sort of economics and the economy, but I've ended up becoming a bit of a ranter mouth on the radio and the telly to just talk about the Brexit process, which I quite enjoy because, there's nothing so great as being paid to mouth off about something you're interested in, is there? It's kind of representative for academia. So, strong focus on mutual engagement. Most of our profile is actually regional. We're not POLIS, we're not Cambridge. We don't sort of hit at that level, but where we do very well is local and regional outlets and international media. Funny enough, I managed to get into The Age about a month ago. A conversation with their London correspondents. I was quite pleased about that. So we're a sort of post-92 university. I know that has the same traction here, so our main focus is on civic engagement within the region. And as such, with a strong mix of sort of various regional stakeholders. In terms of what we're looking at the moment, sort of some niche areas, again, given our small capacity. There's this work I'm presenting today, which is a sort of focus groups, interviews with people looking at their attitudes to Brexit in what we regard as strongly Leave voting areas, because they're the people everyone's interested in, of course. We have a couple of colleagues working on the implications of Brexit for Gibraltar, because the Spanish government have made very clear to the United Kingdom, and history is full of irony, isn't it? That if they want Gibraltar to be subject to any future economic relationship with the EU, then some form of close sovereignty is what the Spanish government are demanding. Which of course is a complete turnaround when Spain joined the EU, because back then it was Britain that had the veto. Now the worm has turned. And, like I said, some economic work around understanding Brexit and regional disparities. One of the things we're arguing now, and it's something I might touch on when I come back to this, is one thing that Brexit has been argued to demonstrate in the UK is the very deep sort of regional divides, economic primarily. So we try to do some work there around understanding regional economic performance, because that has an implication for funding formulas. And of course, at the moment, being a member of the EU, the UK, of course, benefits through European regional funding mechanisms. Now, coming into 2020, as it stands, they will go. And of course, there's no guarantee the UK government will be even in a position to replace them, given the sort of current orthodoxy around austerity and restricting public finance. Whether that survives this is an interesting question in itself. So they're the main sort of themes. There are others doing various things around legal aspects, global security and these sorts of things. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. And in the context of these sort of public perceptions, just sort of travel through the Brexit journey. I don't know how much you understand about this. I don't even know how much interest there is. I'm guessing in a sort of political science area, you'll be more engaged with the sort of topic, because it's just fascinating in itself in terms of geopolitical implications. But in terms of trying to actually understand the mindset of who wants this and why, it's not a rational conversation. So, very easy, just go through some background of the Brexit vote, and briefly touch on the methodology. I'm obliged to do that, being an academic presentation, of course, aren't I? Then take you through these research findings, maybe pitching this as an exploratory study, because it's our intention just to keep going back and doing this as the whole thing unfolds. And try to build up some sort of crude, I won't quite use the word longitudinal, because that implies you get the same people every time, but some kind of snapshot over time to try and complement the sort of more brute quantitative surveys that you get like YouGov and these sorts of things. And then we can talk about it at the end. So this is a theme that we sort of wanted to pick up on, in that the Brexit result has been interpreted, not exclusively so of course, but in very wide circles has been interpreted as a reaction against globalisation and metropolitan elites. Now, you know, I mean, if I wanted to bore you, I could start positing this in terms of neoliberalism versus populism and all the rest of these nice little diagrams we like to stick up for students, but that's been one of the key arguments, you know, that one of the underpinning sort of explanations put forward has been this, and one example here is that 2/3 of Labour Party constituencies voted Leave, so the estimates go. Right, so this notion that it's been very strongly built around this sense of being left behind. One thing you can say, and I think this is one reasonably good study here, is that those who were most likely to vote Leave were those on low incomes, those with low educational qualifications, and those who felt, you know, this is a tricky statement, isn't it, that Britain has got a lot worse in the last 10 years. You know, you'd almost look at that and say poor, white and old, wouldn't you? That'd be one way of putting it. And so, one reasonably authoritative study, this political scientist Matthew Goodwin, he's only 36, incidentally, some of you may have heard of him. He's claimed to fame as doing a study on the UK Independence Party, quite a piece. Now, Goodwin and Heath focus very heavily on demographic variables, and so, of course, their findings suggest a strong correlation between factors such as education, age, and they concluded that, particularly here in terms of their regression model, but in sort of into quantitative modelling, the proportion of over 65s, the proportion of people with no educational qualification, the presence of EU migrants, and I suspect an important factor here, the change in the number of EU migrants were all important factors. Now, what I don't say here is there's strong regional dimensions to this, because that, which I admit to me, they talk about two outliers in this type of analysis. One's London and the other's Scotland. So come back to Scotland, of course. They're all important factors. So, okay, so we come back to the point, white, poor, well, we'll say low educated, rather than poor, although income is clearly a factor, and old. That would almost old. Let's have a look at this. Now, this is data that the BBC obtained through Freedom of Information request, broken down at the level of the council ward, so quite granular and local. Now I like to pick on Birmingham because I live in Birmingham, but Birmingham was also held up in the UK as a sort of bellwether place because the city of Birmingham local authority area in aggregate voted 50-50. Yeah. London had about a 62% Remain vote, Scotland had about a 65% Remain vote, Northern Ireland had a 57% Remain vote, Wales I think had about a 52% Leave vote. So when you start to distill down to this sort of level, some of these factors really begin to start to stick out. And of course, age. You can see a clear link there in terms of age. The other clear link you can see here, of course, is white and education levels. So, what is interesting here, of course, though, is when you start to pick into these ward level data, you take this location here, Handsworth Wood, you get a 42% Leave vote and 43%. And the percentage of white inhabitants in that area is only about 23%. So whilst this notion of being a white protest vote is an important one, it's not exclusive. About estimates suggest something like 28% of the black and minority ethnic vote was to vote Leave. And there's some anecdotal evidence at least to suggest that they were persuaded by arguments that said that uncontrolled immigration of unrestricted immigration of EU migrant workers meant that your family were being kept out. There's some evidence to suggest that some of them were swayed by these arguments, or it was that EU's thought that Jamaica wasn't able to export bananas to the UK. These sorts of arguments, the fact that the EU Europeans were somehow being preferred over their kith and kin. And of course, even more base level responses than that, walking into a corner shop and the sort of Indian-looking chap behind the till, perfect Birmingham accent, going, the neighbourhood's not the same since all these Poles moved in. Right, I find immigration fascinating, delaying it over the generations. So again, it sort of distills to me poorer, low education, white, old. The wards in Birmingham with the strongest Leave vote were almost exclusively white, old and low educated and poor. Whereas the wards that voted very strongly to Remain, like 2/3 Remain plus, had high ethnic groups or otherwise highly educated. So at least in Birmingham it wasn't a big protest vote by people who were upset about discrimination against the Commonwealth, So we want to pick behind some of these sentiments further to understand what these people were thinking. And so what we did about a year and a half ago was that we set up a series of town hall events which we call the CBS Roadshow. Now, part of that was just brutally in terms of promoting ourselves to an audience in Birmingham, but the premise here was to try and set up a situation whereby we would come into we would hire a town hall venue, room or somewhere, and we would just sort of social media in the area and invite people to come in and talk about Brexit. So it wasn't about us coming in trying to get our view on Brexit. We wanted to know what people thought of Brexit. So we wanted to know, did they vote in the 2016 referendum? Why did they vote the way they did? Did they think the government was handling negotiations well? It's a bit of a leading question maybe, isn't it? And if another referendum were to be held now, would they still vote the same way? Now, of course, of the electorate, about 30% did not vote in that referendum. That said, the 70% turnout for UK elections of any sort is actually quite high. Yeah? When you compare it to Westminster elections during the Blair years and so on. So that's interpreted as quite a turnout. Now, I'm not going to talk about the mechanics of how Leave, Marshall, had voted and all the rest, and that's since come out. If you want to ask questions on that later, feel free. But we wanted to know why people thought the way they did. We wanted to test this notion of left behind. We wanted to test notions of whether people were voting against their own economic interests because they didn't understand the arguments. Which is commonly put out. It just says, very crudely put that Leave voters were basically just ignorant. We wanted to test this hypothesis. And supplemented by some ad hoc interviews arising out of these meetings. So, in terms of the ethics, fully informed consent, voluntary participation, anonymity, confidentiality, etc. Now, these were the areas of the UK, according to Hanretty's 2016 analysis, that were the top 10 estimated Leave voting constituencies. Now, they're all outside of London, more or less. Clacton is in Essex, South Holland and the Deepings is in Lincolnshire, which is sort of Midlands. Great Yarmouth is East Anglia. Walsall North is in the Midlands, West Midlands. Doncaster North is Yorkshire. Stoke-on-Trent North is in the West Midlands. Kingston upon Hull is Yorkshire. Castle Point is Essex. South Basildon is Essex. Boston and Skegness is Lincolnshire. So the Leave vote very strongly skewed to Essex, the sort of Midlands and parts of Yorkshire. It's almost like when you look at the UK geography, it's not so much a north-south divide, but it's like a missing middle. So these areas sort of in the middle of England where you sort of vote come out most strongly. And the West Midlands region, the wider West Midlands, had the strongest Brexit vote of any UK government office region, 60% for the area that Birmingham is posited within. But to look at them at face value suggests very different socioeconomic profiles. Some of these, South Holland, Great Yarmouth, etc., Boston, rural agricultural regions. Now these regions in the last 15 years or so had a high influx of European workers because British people don't want to pick strawberries. They don't want to work in areas where they don't have a defined career path or a pension plan. So, surprise, surprise. High reliance on immigrant labour in these areas. So much so that Boston, for example, is a town that prior to the 2004 recession of Central and Eastern European countries and the opening up of the UK labour market to people from Poland and so on, was a town that was almost exclusively sort of white men brick, very monoglot. Now about 35% of its working age population are European. So as a town, it's had a huge influx in the last 15 years. And the Conservative government or Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition as it was back in 2010, one of the things they did was to remove funding to assist areas like this adjust to a population influx. You can see where this is going. Other areas, particularly the Midlands, Walsall, Doncaster, Stoke, Hull to a degree, what people nowadays might refer to as post-industrial. These are sort of the old labour heartlands, the old industrial heart of Britain. So Stoke-on-Trent is famous, of course, or was famous for Wedgwood potteries. A lot of that's been stripped out basically to the Far East. The residual legacy shows. Doncaster, Yorkshire, mining, coal mining, of course. Walsall historically was leather making, but also old manufacturing or mining areas of these. So you begin to see the logic of these labour seats where they voted Leave. And others, the Essex places, these are the people who migrated in the sort of slum clearances in London in the 50s and 60s, so EastEnders, that's who they are, they're all sort of Cockneys, older as well in many cases. So we wanted to look at these areas, so we managed to do focus group sessions in most of these places, and the average attendance at these was about 10. They weren't huge, but this is qualitative work. I'm not interested in trying to survey 100 people. I'm interested in getting some kind of dialogue. So what I present in the sessions following sort of loosely themed around these areas, these sort of things emerge. So we try to understand overall attitudes to Brexit, migration, sovereignty and identity, the kind of things that are emerging in these conversations. At a very basal level, the referendum was sort of interpreted, I might well say interpreted by the Prime Minister Theresa May as a referendum on migration. For her, the overriding imperative in any agreement with the EU going forward, if they get one, it is an end to this so-called freedom of movement people from Europe. That's her red line. That's where she hasn't budged so far. So, as I said, this is a very loose discursive session now. It's just reporting people's sentiments, but some interesting things we can pick out here. So, this person clearly voted Remain. We're a silly little country. We should be with our European partners. I'd rather be with Europe than with America. I was really upset after finding out the results of the referendum. I felt heavy, like something really bad was happening. Like I had a stone in my heart. My son was upset too. He blamed my generation, but not me. He knows I don't hold those views. Old people, it was old people who did it, wasn't it? So, this person was a Remainer in Walsall. Clearly not happy still, but what this says for social cohesion is difficult to say. I mean, when you come back to that, the country is deeply divided still. Now, in terms of migration, we wanted to try and understand, was this simply racism, which, you know, there was a noted upsurge in the level of hate crime incidences following the outcome of this referendum. Although if one looks at wider social attitudes, the shift in attitudes to migration really began to kick in after the 2008 economic downturn. Because when the economy was growing, it's fine. You had the opening of the doors to Eastern European migrants in 2004. In the UK, it was only the UK and Ireland, I think, who did this unrestrictedly. The Blair government advisors at the time suggested maybe 40,000 people, then 400,000. That's a lot, quite an influx in one go. I'm not arguing against migration. As far as I'm concerned, migrants generate value, they make a net contribution, you know. But after 2008, when you look at social attitudes, there's a noted increase in the number of people who begin to say that they're prejudiced or very prejudiced against foreigners. And that's, you then have that coming up, and there's a noted increase in terms of social attitude surveys to those who think migration is a problem. You know, it's probably not surprising that if you just lost your job, you know, the temptation is to blame the foreigner because they only cut your wages. That was very interesting because that started to have an effect towards the end of the then Labour government, where there was a strike in an oil refinery off the east coast of England, and the workers were protesting against what they regarded as the use of cheap foreign labour to undercut their conditions. And to be in hindsight, that kind of served as a forewarning of what was to come. And of course, one of the last things that the Labour government did was to ratify the European Temporary Agency Workers Directive to try and give them some basic employment rights. So, was it simply racism? Well, you know, we had views ranging all the way from fucking, you know, to, well, that's what you get when you talk to someone in a pub. You know, some of this methodology is simply going into Wetherspoon pubs and trying to accost people and say, what do you think about Brexit? You know. The more nuanced arguments. The woman there said she voted leave because she thought if we left the EU, all foreigners would go home, but they're still here. It was a walking irony because I said, well, where do you live? She said, I live in Cyprus. Yeah, I thought your status is not something you've reflected on then. The more nuanced arguments, perhaps. For example, this came out quite a lot actually in terms of the migration arguments. This is in Boston. Migration here has had an effect on the town. My son came home from school today and said that the teacher had told all the local kids to do painting today because the foreign children had to learn English. And you couple that with the sort of disparities in resource allocation, which all got funding for adjustment measures of the sort I mentioned earlier. Maybe it's not a surprise to hear these sort of responses mentioned. And it wasn't just in Boston either, it's sort of similar here. This again sort of made me chuckle. One gentleman who in a focus group public-facing meeting in Walsall suggested, look, my mum's French, don't get me wrong, I like Europe, but we've had pressure on schools here. We can't put both our children in the same school because of pressure on places. Now, if you're a parent with kids, that's an issue. You have to send the children to different schools. It just compounds the rush hour misery, doesn't it? So to us then, that suggests that, I mean, for a lot of people, or at least in terms of the language they use, you know, this is qualitative research. You know, in a fashion, you have to take the responses that you're getting as honest, if not factual. You know, factual is not triangulate and build up a profile of what you think people understand. But you know, I felt these were genuine perceptions in that regard. That these, you know, the knowledgeableness of them notwithstanding, but suggesting that concern over public services would drive factor of attitudes. Because a migrant person is highly visible. You know, the government policy on tax and spending less so. But one could walk away from that and draw a different conclusion, pick out the foreigners, like I say, and just spend more money on essential services. especially when you look at the disparities in funding for things like transport and education and so on that exist between London and the rest of England in particular. Now, this is another thing that began to bubble up. The other one is sovereignty. This is quite a hot topic because people seem to want to go to the wall on this issue of sovereignty as they understand it. I've always felt that the EU is very anti-democratic and there's no mechanism for getting rid of it. Getting rid of the EU, I guess. Well, it was never meant to be a democratic institution. I'd like to see all the European countries leave the EU. I feel that we in the UK have no say in the EU and that we need to be ourselves again and actually make our own rules. That's it. You strip out the race element and that this transcends a lot of that. And it's not an economic argument. Now, if you want to do a discourse analysis on it and pick it apart, be my guess, because you could question everything in that statement. Yeah, you could. The 2016 referendum for such an individual then was a big red button where they could go bang, get rid of them. Yeah, into the reject bin. It was never meant to be a democratic institution. Skip over that statement. I feel that we in the UK have no say in the EU. I feel. Not I think, I feel. And the UK government, of course, at some various point, senior ministers saying, of course we had a lot of say in the EU. It just felt like we didn't. We need to be ourselves again and actually make our own rules. Now, you will have a better understanding of concepts of sovereignty maybe than I do. You might do far more so than they do. Sovereignty, of course, is a very complex, multi-tiered thing in this day and age, isn't it, with a so-called globalised world. Any trade deal, of course, can be regarded as trading on sovereignty, can't it? But that's not our starting point for these individuals. So, in answer perhaps partially to the notion that they didn't know what they were doing, some people were adamant in turning up at these events, generally UKIP persuasion, but not exclusively so. I knew what I was doing. Don't treat us as stupid or ignorant. I knew on the day that we were voting to leave the single market and the customs union. Okay? The government put out a brochure telling us all about the EU. I knew what we were doing. And moreover, that they would reiterate that they knew there would be an economic cost to this. But sovereignty would be worth it. Sovereignty is worth it. There's one poll that suggested 40% of people who identified as Leave voters would be happy to see this go ahead, even if they or a family member lost their job. Because much of the argument in terms of the referendum was built in terms of, we'll take a hit on GDP, we'll lose our economic growth, companies will leave. You even had George Osborne, the then Treasurer, stating, we'll have to bring in a horror budget, the pound will collapse and all the rest. I suppose part of the problem in trying to articulate any meaningful sense of economic cost is, unless you're an economist or otherwise interested in markets or whatever, the terms such as GDP don't have any traction. And they don't have any traction because they're not really vouched in terms of everyday lived experience. And the other key point with Brexit, of course, at least at the time of the referendum, less so now maybe, is that it hadn't happened, had it? It was still this future event with no clear understanding what the hits would actually be to the person in the street, because they hadn't experienced it. The only tangible experience for the person in the street after the referendum, of course, was the devaluation of sterling that occurred. That was a tangible hit, starting to notice that things which are imported were becoming more expensive. But that was it. There was no immediate run of companies trying to leave, no immediate banks calling out their operations, moving to Frankfurt. Now, the obvious answer to that is more business involves a form of sunk costs, and I'm going to leave straight away. But that didn't matter. Now, do they just say this because it hasn't happened yet, so it's all hypothetical, and this is just bravado? It's very interesting to notice at the level of rhetoric now, back at the time of the referendum, the lead Brexiteers, your David Davis, Boris Johnson, your Liam Fox, these people, they were all quite shameless in saying, we will have the benefits of EU membership. Don't worry, folks, we'll have everything we have now, but, you know, we'll be able to do what we want. Brexit, if you want to compare it to other referendum, personally, I hate the damn things. So I can't go back to it reduces everything to a binary. But if you must have one, compare a referendum, say, with the Irish referendum on abortion. That's been a divisive issue in Ireland for decades. But look at the way they handled it. Yeah, they went through a very carefully crafted process of citizens' assemblies to actually have a lot of information to help inform people. The Scottish independence referendum in 2014. Again, a key aspect here was to try to understand, if you go ahead with this, what is it likely to be? There was none of this with Brexit. And indeed, if you are of the somewhat cynical persuasion, and I might be, you would say, well, that was the whole point. The whole point of Brexit was it was never going to be one nirvana for anyone. And if you're Jeremy Corbyn, and everyone thinks Corbyn is pro-Brexit, you know, the leader of the Labour Party, you view Brexit as a chance to have socialism in one country because the EU, you know, restrict state aid. Either Jacob Rees-Mogg or Liam Fox, you think the UK labour market is too regulated, or you think we should have environmental standards on a par with India. Yeah. For those people, any form of regulation is bad because regulation hinders the pursuit of private gain. You're more likely to find an accurate explanation for the driving motives of the lead actors and the lead campaign in that area than you are simple nostrums around regain control. In the UK never lost control. The UK was very adept at throwing its weight around in Europe. And you can argue that the single market was a Thatcher creation, for example. So, then you get this, older people, older. And this is one thing that somebody pointed out to me. Gerard, we can stop any time we like. And this is something that, you know, you don't realise this until someone points out to you at the time. Yeah. If you were going to school in the UK in the 50s or the 60s, your geography book was one corner coloured pink. And these people still live in this world. Yeah. So, yeah. Oh yes, of course, you know, I think Prince Philip. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, and this is, you know, your Blue Rinse Brigade, your old brigade. We join a common market, not a political union. That's not strictly true, because even at the time that the EEC dialogue as it was around ever closer union. That was there from day one. It wasn't like the UK bought into a free trade zone and that was it. And the UK government at the time actually published a detailed white paper stating what Britain's position was in the world and why this would be a good thing. There's none of that now. Okay? And then there's this argument related to the issue of joining the EEC as it was that the UK had stabbed the Commonwealth in the back. Now, it hardly goes without saying that when these people talk about the Commonwealth, they're not talking about India. No, they're not talking about Jamaica. They're talking about what some of these fantasists call CANZUK. I don't know if anyone's heard of that. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, UK. That's the bit of the Commonwealth they like. Theresa May was quite happy to pursue a trade agreement with India until the Indian government, or Prime Minister of India nonetheless, stated that they wanted relaxation of visa conditions on Indian nationals as part of it. End of talks. So, this is what people felt. This sort of, you know, older brigade, living on their pension, have their own house. They are not the poor working class, you know, they might have been, but there were people who flowered in the age of Thatcher, they got their house, you know. So yes, leaving would somehow enable this to be rectified. I don't think these people have any particular understanding of what these economies do nowadays, clearly not. When questioned further on this about the views of said Commonwealth countries, though, the same individuals were unable to articulate any knowledge of the would-be negotiating positions of, say, India or Australia. I think it's like, we could get a trade deal with Australia just like that, was one response in Stoke. So, rather there just seemed to be a blind faith that there would be a deal with the EU and trade deals with other countries, perhaps best encapsulated in this statement. Now, this almost had been a condition of faith for 2 years, was that Britain would get a sweetheart deal because German industrialists would never allow Angela Merkel to not pressure Juncker and the rest of the EU entourage into giving Britain a cake and eat it deal. And yet, I think BMW produced engines for German cars in the UK, but that hasn't happened. There has been no pressure on German industrialists to get Germany to head either EU into giving Britain a deal where it can have access to a single market, friction-free, but keep foreigners out. That in essence is Britain's ideal stance. It wants the economic benefits, but not the human element. And the EU has said, as a loopy all along, you are not going to have this. You want to be part of the single market, you accept all of the 4 freedoms: capital, goods, services, labour, not one of them. Leaving aside a relative ignorance of how understanding how the modern economy works, and if you have trade integration in production integration and manufacturing, you can't separate the movement of the engineering services, the vehicle parts, from moving the vehicle parts. So even if you could get out of a single market in goods only, it wouldn't work in practice. Now, what is interesting here is that Leave participants, when we turn to identity issues, were far more likely to describe themselves as English rather than British. And in contrast, Remain participants recalled many semblance of Englishness as they associated with the sort of crypto-fascist movement, basically. Little semblance of regional identity, unless you think of countries like Scotland as regions. And this talk about the revenge against metropolitan elites, just a simple mistrust accorded to us in going to these places. In Doncaster, the response to one irate Facebook warrior was, "Fuck off. What are you doing here?" So this is just a stream of invective on social media, because as I said, we use Facebook to advertise our presence. So for the 30 people in the room here, 300 of these comments. So didn't want to come to the meeting. By the way, Birmingham University, we have our own university. We don't need you to bring your propaganda. We voted Leave and Leave we shall. Now, I'm not going to claim for a minute that those views are necessarily representative of people inside the trend. But this really does buy into the don't trust the expert argument, And that was a quote by Gove, throwaway remark. I don't think this country's had enough of experts, because the damage done in failing to predict the economic downturn 10 years earlier by 90% of talking heads on the media who call themselves economists return to haunt in terms of this. Don't give us stuff about the actual issues, just here to make mischief. So, general lack of trust in the political class and elites in general. And I thought that was actually quite an interesting about some of these people. What do politicians and nappies have in common? So, yes, you could say this perhaps top-down measure decision-making in the UK as a lot of people feeling excluded perhaps from the political process. An overwhelming sense of London-centric interests. And I think that could have been a key driving factor. Now you're listening to us. Now you will feel the pain that we feel, this notion of the economic cost. But I'll skip over this because we'll touch on this if you want. I sort of touched on it a bit. But I think in terms of the future of the UK, whilst people like Boris Johnson like to talk about the nation state as being the only legitimate authority to make rules and invoking this ancient Greek concept of the demos or people, his starting point is that the UK is a proper demos member. He's whistling in the wind because only 29% of people in the UK self-identify as British according to the 2011 census. If you were to take his argument to its conclusion, then the logical corollary of that is that the UK should be scrapped in favour of separate states for different nations. Where that leaves the 25% or so of the population in the UK who identify as British remains to be seen. But that is a serious point. I'm not just being tongue-in-cheek here. People in Scotland who voted most strongly as saying the UK in the 2014 referendum lived in the wealthy surrounds of Glasgow and Edinburgh. The sort of small C conservative middle class. Those same people voted most strongly as saying like the EU. The margins of that 80% remain in these people. And it was explicitly put into the 2014 referendum campaign at the time by the UK Prime Minister and Leader of the Opposition, including these people, if you leave the UK, you would have to rejoin the EU. So now they say in the UK, they're going to leave the EU. So, if anything, and the disparities across English regions suggest that, I'm not the only person to say this, but I think this notion now of the breakup of the UK has a lot more traction given the Scottish and Irish dimension that Brexit has opened a big can of worms on. So I'm going to stop it there, okay?
Thank you. Thank you for being so helpful. Now, do we have some questions? Yes.
You've alluded to the Scottish exceptionalism, if you like, and you've got a marital connection to Scotland, and you spent time in Glasgow.
Yes.
I'm interested in the fact, what you said about the missing middle of Britain, so the Remain vote was strongest in London and in Scotland. And then there's this big swathe in between. Socioeconomically and party political terms, for a long time, the north of England and places like Glasgow in Scotland both voted Labour. And yet they voted differently on this. So you just mentioned towards the end there that well-off small-C Conservatives in Edinburgh, I think you said.
Edinburgh, surrounding Glasgow, these.
Yep. What about the working class voting in Glasgow? Why did they vote more to stay than some of those people in Yorkshire when historically they tend to be on the same side of the political divide? Is there a Scottish regional thing going on, a Scottish national thing going on which makes them different from the north of England? I'm curious about that.
I think the simple answer would be yes. Now, what's happened here? I've tried to get research funding to explore this question in detail, so it is an interesting one to ask, obviously. Because you're right, when you look demographically at parts of Glasgow, they fit the bill on white, they fit the bill on poor, they fit the bill on age structure. The only variable that seems to differ on the most part is education, that their average levels of education are better in Scotland. So you would ask yourself, is education a factor in more push to Remain? I would say yes, it is. But is it solely that? I wouldn't, no, it's not solely that. The other distinct element with Scotland, of course, is that you have this, like Australian parts, you have this regional tier of government or state level government, and then to all intents and purposes, the Scottish government has a broadly equivalent set of powers to the Victorian government. Has some tax raising ability, full income tax. And you ask yourself the question, does this devolved tier of governments have a positive impact? I'd say it does, but it's also bound up with issues of identity. But it's also bound up with issues of the change of the Labour Party in that period. The Labour Party in Scotland, from about the 60s onwards, maybe, was largely a one-party state. It was the party of government, the party of office. The devolution genie coming out of the bottle post-97, seeing a more visible tier of government at local level, perhaps being more responsive, and just the shift to Blairism in the Labour Party, and this sense of London being at a distance and not really caring for Scottish concerns. And I suppose in contrast to the north of England, where this regional tier is entirely devoid, or equal to Midlands for that matter, you have this block at intermediate level that could wrap itself up in a Scottish identity, putting Scottish interests first, and providing a counter-vehicle to Westminster. But I think the other issue that's been bandied about in terms of Scotland and Northern Ireland, Scotland in particular, is that the EU perhaps was seen as a counterbalance to this overweening informal entity called England. That's been put forward, the very fact, and you might well see it in the Welsh vote as well, that those who define themselves as Welsh speakers and 80% of the vote Remain. So this is an argument put forward, I think, by people like Tom Nairn, 40 years ago at the break for Britain, and his point wasn't so much any over being sensitive, reimbursed Scottishness, but he was saying was that having joined the EU showed them that a different tier of government, a different way of behaving was possible, and that over the years really undermined the premise of Westminster as this supreme thing. And I think that's certainly also in Northern Ireland, the EU as a partner to the Good Friday Agreement, it sees its role as to uphold the peace, which in narrow communistic interpretations of Birmingham and Westminster Central you don't get. And by dint of being European, it's allowed those who see themselves as British in Northern Ireland or those who see themselves as Irish to have a common identity and being part of this thing where they can just get rid of the border because you can be in Northern Ireland now and be Irish if you want. You can travel back and forth between Ireland and Northern Ireland. You can get Irish passport, you want an Irish passport, you can.
Whether you're Catholic or Protestant.
Sorry?
Whether you're Catholic
Yeah.
or Protestant.
Yeah. Well, the Remain vote in Northern Ireland wasn't solely delivered by Catholics there because they're not a numerical majority. But it's this sense of economic benefit, I think, and this peace dividend.
Yeah, thanks. So I was just wondering, because it feels to me a bit, there's a bit of a disconnect between the findings on, the general findings on demographics, and then your findings from interviews and on identity. And so, which one is it? Is this a story about poor, uneducated people who just, can't tell what's good for them, or can't understand the political economic situation around them? Or is this the story of people who hold, certain identity and are fighting, or, this struggle over, the identity of the main identity of their of the country and of their society? And in that regard, this is the actual story. Then, I think there should be some, something to bring these two together, because the identity story is a larger story that's been told, elsewhere in the world, including, Trump in the U.S. And all kinds of other backlash against, cosmopolitan liberalism around the world.
Yeah. I think it was very put in a simple lead narrative that take back control. The two issues were welded together simply by dint of the fact that for the poorer voter, it was very convincingly sold to people that if we're no longer in the EU, we can claw back all that money that we put into the EU. The EU was simply seen as a vehicle to sponge off British money. That was sold in that regard. So this notion of take back control encompasses both. We can spend our own money. We can put it in the NHS. Yeah, you sit there and you see a bus driving around with 350 million a week extra for the NHS. Yeah. So that's how the two arguments melded together. But I wouldn't explain this solely as a working class protest vote. Because for every person in Doncaster who voted Leave, there were people in Hampshire who voted Leave. And it's not, there were as many well-to-do Tory voters in those leafy little shires who voted Leave en bloc as it were working class people. And the core cities, this is a bit more mud, the core cities in the north remain majorities, Newcastle, Manchester, Liverpool. Yeah. So there may be an additional ones around there, I don't know, proximity to universities still will be the centre of things. Whereas these peri-urban areas were the stronger voting ones.
Hull always crops up a lot.
Sorry?
Hull gets mentioned a lot in those.
Yeah. Hull was, the people I spoke to in Hull weren't from Hull, they were from North Yorkshire around it, they were affluent Conservative voters who didn't see it in terms of economic destitution. But you can marry those two arguments together. So I think winning an election or anything is about building a coalition, isn't it? So
yeah,
you have to share narrative they all gel.
Sure. No, just because one of your quotes that you put there was, that, we understand the, repercussions, we understand the cost.
Yeah.
But still, don't treat us as stupid, because we're not. And so the question is, are they really? Because there could be that there were just things that were more important.
For those people, right? It's qualitative.
And I don't know, you're one of the data.
For those people, that seemed to be more important, yeah. But that's, but then there were some others who said, well, if we'd known now, we'd known then we would have changed our minds. Yeah. So, I mean...
Did you have any data about, the portions of the people you interviewed that,
No.
regret,
No.
for example, or...
No. I wasn't keeping it to that much. Just to
sure. How many interviews?
The average attendance at a forum was about 10. Yeah. So in total, what's that? About 100?
Okay.
Yeah.
And the follow-up interviews?
Off memory, about 14.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to see if Geelong has got any questions.
Yeah, I've got a question.
Right, please.
But it's following Andrew Scott's question about nationalism in Scotland.
Mm.
I'm curious about whether anyone's looked into the factor of neoliberal public policy around Britain. I know that on education policy, England went in for much more competitive-oriented education policies, testing students, pushing teachers to perform on market criteria. I don't know about other policy areas, privatising electricity or something. I'm not sure about how Ireland compares, but I do know that Scotland and Wales were much less inclined. They didn't go nearly as far as much with the neoliberal public policy. So I'm curious if that's another explanation. Is it worth looking at the voting data about, which areas elected Labor left people, which people elected sort of more Blairite Labor people, and how does this correspond with the distribution of neoliberal public policy around Britain? Is that a possible explanation? So it's quite a rational reaction to neoliberalism associated with the EU, and we want to get out of it. We want to be a much more national-oriented, social democratic sort of public policy.
Yeah, I'm not sure to what extent it is that people who voted Leave saw the EU as neoliberal. No one in public discourse talks about the EU as being a neoliberal project. I mean, it's a more basal.
Doesn't isn't it Corby's argument?
Yeah, I mean, he does, yes. But I'm thinking more in terms of people who voted. Sorry?
He's a public figure.
Yeah, but
They do come up in any of your interviews.
no. I mean, people don't talk about neoliberalism. They don't talk about the EU as restricting state aid. And that isn't something that we found. I mean, in terms of your point about the education systems, I mean, certainly in Scotland has gone a different way to Westminster, in that it's not embraced this sort of market fees-led regime for home students. Students from the rest of the UK has, but Scottish students no. I don't know how you would separate, having a Blairite MP from having a left MP. I'm not even sure that the voters necessarily identified people in those terms, unless it comes out in terms of something explicit, as we've seen yesterday with 7 Labour MPs resigning from the party and wanting a second referendum and that kind of thing. Maybe there it does, and it comes out in terms of, well, we voted Leave, now we shouldn't have another referendum, so good luck Angela Smith if she has to fight an election on that platform in her Yorkshire seat. I mean, that would be interesting to see what happens there. But I think in terms of education so far, it's been more in terms of sort of survey analysis in terms of controlling the various factors, and that's to come back to my earlier point. That's one where Scotland sort of sticks out. It's one of the few tangible variables you can pick on to say where people's overall level of education for a given demographic is higher. Not hugely so, significant in a statistical sense.
I had a question that kind of links to this. How much can the Brexit decision be linked to the financial crisis and austerity?
Oh, I come back to the earlier comment I made. We look at social attitudes, so when we see the economic downturn, we see the sort of attitudes to migration take a swing from there. Trying to think how to frame the response. I wouldn't, in terms of the consequent attitudes to migration and things like that, I'd say, yeah, you can certainly demonstrate a link. Is that the same as saying it's a rejection of neoliberalism? Well, it's a bit more difficult to say. I think it's a rejection of something, but it's not perhaps so openly in terms of rejection of austerity. You spoke to there. They talk about question public services, but they don't talk about the government funding about it. Yeah. And that's an interesting conversation to try and have with people, because it's very easy to say that the government is in debt and we must repay our debt, because as Margaret Thatcher once said, the economy is like a household and people understand that, because even though they're wrong, the economy is, the government's not a household, it can, anyway. But it's a contributing factor, I think, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I thought that was really interesting. So I'm from Derry.
Hey.
in Northern Ireland,
Yeah,
so-
it's a lodestone area at the moment, of course.
Yeah. I'm going home a couple of weeks' time on the eve of Brexit, so there'll be some activity there about the border. But if you had done the other flipped version of that league table, so you did the 10 most leaviest, you did the 10 most Romaniest, I think we were being number 2.
Yeah.
And in Northern Ireland, it's obviously very different in terms of why the reason people go to leave and why people go to remain. It's a completely different dynamic, because we're one of the most poorest parts of the UK.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hasn't got the same.
No, the Scottish dimension was similar in Africa.
Yeah.
Probably working class areas that strong remain votes.
My question is about your data and the timing of when you've captured the data, because as you've alluded to, the conversation's changed so much since 2016. Like the people who fronted the conversation in 2016, Gove, Johnson, and so forth, and Farage, are all pretty much gone. They're not like in front and center. Gove, I don't know where he is anymore.
I don't know if that partially answers your question.
Sorry? That's... and so, and at the time, everyone talked about the bus and like, the NHS, and like no one really talks about that anymore, because it feels like the argument from my perspective, the argument that some of your participants talked about like how it'll cost, but we'll do it anyway, because, like even if it's going to cost us economically. That I can't remember. People weren't saying that in 2016, and it feels like that's developed over time. So I wonder. You said you didn't want a longitudinal study, but
I do. No, I do.
Okay.
I mean, our aim is to go back and do more of these, money permitting, basically.
Well, have you observed the responses of leave voters changing? Like, are they re-rationalizing?
No, not by now.
Not by now.
No, and I think that the YouGov data there suggests some shift, but is that a huge shift? I don't think so. You know, because the last poll that they did in Australia suggests there that 48% of their respondents think it was wrong to leave the human ISO. That is not the same as saying we want to stay in. You get a chunk of these people say it was a wrong decision, but we have to honour the vote. No, I don't understand that mindset. The referendum does not legally binding, and you can change your mind. But there's this notion out there with a substantial body of people that suggests that, you know, and Theresa May keeps backing this view of if we don't honour the referendum result, all these people who never voted before will feel betrayed by democracy. We must honour the referendum result, we must honour the referendum result. And it also infects Remainers who think, well, I didn't vote for this, but we must respect the result. So that suggests that the country is still roughly split down the middle, which to me is even more amazing given the last 2 years.
Well, have you noticed leave voters changing the way they talk about their vote over time? Is what I'm getting at, because
well,
did they mention the
yeah,
bus?
I mean,
It's
the 2016 narrative is we can have our cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
The 2018 narrative is, well, this will cost us, but it'll be worth it.
Yeah.
That's it in a nutshell. Now, like I said, I mean, is it because it's not happened yet? Is it because these people are not going to be directly affected by losing their job? I don't know. Yeah, that to me is the further thing that will be interesting to see unfold as this goes forward, when it becomes real. And for example, I suppose we can say expected announcement, can't we, by Honda that it is going to shut down its plant in Swindon, which will just write 3,500 jobs because of Brexit. Yeah. I expect that announcement to occur today, tomorrow. Then it becomes real. But of course, then the narrative from Brexiteers changes. It says, oh, that wasn't anything to do with Brexit, it was just market trends. I think, no, the Japanese government signed a free trade agreement with the EU that will mean tariff-free access to their vehicles. You cannot separate the two. But yeah, I mean, it's, I'd say that the stubbornness and persistence in pursuit of this surprises me. Yeah, where there may be some shift, and I can't quantify this at this point, maybe in those who didn't vote the first time out. You know, this 30% of the electorate who didn't vote. Why didn't they vote? Did they think that it was going to be a Remain win, so they didn't feel they had to vote? We had a couple say it was, I didn't understand the issues enough at the time, I felt I couldn't vote on it. So I suppose maybe that comes back to the comment I made about you can have a referendum, they should have a longer leading period to educate people, inform people.
Questions?
I was kind of interested by a few things. One is, I was thinking as you were talking a lot about the context of 2016, and one of the things that I would have thought would emerge was the theme of terrorism in Europe and this sort of Syrian crisis. And we're seeing, at the time of the Brexit, you've got the world's largest migration crisis since World War II, and you've got terrorist attacks occurring right across the continent. And it seems to me that sort of drove, there was that great poster of UKIP where they had the Syrian refugees lined up as if they were coming into the UK. And that became a big part of the narrative around leave, because if we don't leave now, that all these Syrians are going to get access into Britain, and there's going to be terrorists among them. And I think that was a really big sort of, what do you call that, dog whistle thing going on underneath the surface.
Yeah.
But I was very surprised that it didn't come out in your sort of themes, and maybe because it's not as prominent as I thought it was. But do you have any reflections on how that played out in the national consciousness?
We set out to be agnostic in terms of the question we framed, so we didn't explicitly ask, did that influence your thinking?
Yeah.
At the start, okay. It didn't come up in so explicit terms.
Yes.
Clearly it was there. Clearly it was there.
Yeah.
But the poster you're referring to was there was a very brazen statement put out by the Leave campaign that Turkey is about to join the EU.
Yes.
80 million Turks are about to join the EU, which was a lie.
Yes.
Ignoring the fact that Britain could veto that anyway. Yeah. It didn't come out explicitly, maybe because we didn't explicitly ask the question.
Mm-hmm.
You can see the backdrop there.
Yeah.
But not Syrian refugees per se, no.
Interesting.
Yes.
Just wondering, over the course of your interviews, did you manage to find out where their information was being sourced from, like what sort of news programs they were watching, what education they actually had? You say they've got a lot of low education background. Just wondering if a lot of the discourse came from more biased news sources. And when it comes to things like the Syrian refugee crisis, possibly the idea of migration has become so normalised. The idea of the Arab world being kind of stigmatised and stuff has been so normalised that didn't come up explicitly, but it has come up in the idea of xenophobic discourse and rhetoric. Wondering where that information was coming from.
We didn't ask that explicitly, no. We didn't say where you're getting your news broadcast from. I would say an educated guess would be for older respondents. They would read print journalism, the print Daily Express, whose views in these regards are pretty well known.
Because you mentioned
others, social media, websites, a very crude comment would be people just tend to read reviews they already agree with,
Just
little bubbles. No, we didn't ask.
Because you mentioned that they don't, the idea of neoliberals and things like that, the political discourse doesn't really turn up in.
It comes out in this term elites. They're the elite.
That's right, yeah.
That's
so
where
it's like the educated elite.
It doesn't pop up in terms of technical.
Voices on the social media would be
It
the educated elite.
It didn't pop up in terms of a technical conversation around neoliberal and austerity, which surprised me. So I was trying to. You can see the impact of austerity in the comments, but you didn't see people blaming the government for not providing enough public services or spending it. It was the old joke about, I'm the rich man and I've got 19 of your pennies. Look after that foreign guy, he's after your penny. That's our.
And the foreign guy could be anybody,
Yeah, it could be anyone. It could be European, Middle Eastern, it could be anyone. We have a colleague who does hate crime, he looks at Islamophobia, and certainly noted upsurge. But that's interesting. That's from my direct area. Hate crimes against Muslims, interpreting the vote for the European Union without surging against Muslims. One retorted comment was, we've got rid of them, you're next.
Yeah, just like your view on, basically to answer my thinking on this, I struggle to understand whether Brexit based on all the information that we have, was something inevitable? Because all the issues that you've raised have been around for quite some time? Or was it simply because of a better political strategy by the people supporting leave from the EU, coupled by apathy or over-optimism by the other side that wanted to stay in the EU?
I think timing is everything, and in some sense, you could call it a perfect storm. Some of these things were by deliberate design, others conspired favourably for the progenitors of Brexit simply through timings of the business cycle, the economy. It had been there. The sort of turning point of some of these conservatives was the Maastricht Treaty in 93. This was when Europe moved from being primarily a common market to single market, and of course the single market had to be accompanied by the other freedoms in order to appease workers, that it wasn't simply a race to the bottom. Because that was the big fear. You talk about the European social partners, the quid pro quo of having a single market for goods and services and getting a platform of basic rights. And that, of course, was accompanied by Thatcher's speech in 88 to 89. We've not rolled back the frontiers of the state of Britain just to see them replicated or reproduced at a European level. Now, for the diehards, the Jacob Rees-Moggs and the Nigel Rawsons and the Farages and that, they see this as completing the Thatcherite revolution. That's what they see it as. They bowled away in the Major government. Major, of course, had this vote back against Sackney. And then we entered into enlargement of the EU, we entered into opening up of the UK to a lot bigger influx of European workers. The economy is still growing throughout the Blair Brown years. Then we get the crisis, we get the economic downturn. The trends of migration still continue. Then it starts to become a topic again. And then we have the Cameron-Clegg coalition government in 2015, and Cameron promising his backbenchers in order to quell this trying to lance this boil if we get re-elected without a referendum. That's going to settle it. So then, that's on all that then was a conscious voting strategy by the Dominic Cumminses and these architects of the Leave vote, where they use where they use sophisticated software to basically identify people who hadn't voted before, less than 3 million of them, I think, and be able to target these people with messages. So that was clever, to reach out to groups who felt little attachment to the democratic process. And it was these people, and this is, of course, now you get May saying betrayal of democracy because these people will feel that they don't count again. Yeah, but in order to win it, it had to be a simple slogan that covered all of this, and the control element covered everything: migration, economic inequality. Everything can be solved by just taking back control.
Questions at all?
No.
I might ask one last question before we wrap up. What's March 30th going on?
I don't know. I don't know. I really don't know. I do not know. It's going to, simple answer from day one, many things will still be as they were. But no, I don't know. I mean, if you ask me what's going to happen next, Theresa May continues to pursue this withdrawal process of trying to keep all the elements of her party together. The joke has been that she's been negotiating with her own party the last 2 years, not the EU. The hardcore group of Brexit MPs in her own party will not accept anything less than a clear timeline of release from anything to do with the EU, be it a customs union or a backstop in Northern Ireland. The EU are not going to agree to a time limit of backstop in Northern Ireland. They explain it in terms of an insurance policy. Why would you have an insurance policy and say it's only going to work for 5 years and then we'll walk away from it? So they're not going to do that. So whatever she comes back to Parliament with, I don't think will be anything different from what she's put on the table at the moment. Her strategy appears to be to try and get Brexiter MPs on side by saying if you don't vote for this, there'll be no Brexit because you'll run the risk of another referendum, and trying to pork barrel opposition MPs into supporting her agreement by things like promising to protect worker rights or doling out cash for ex-coal mining towns. Will that be enough? I don't know. But I think the longer this goes on, you know, the default setting is if the UK government cannot articulate a response to the EU, the default setting is you leave with no agreement. That's the default setting. I think that is the most probable outcome. I'll say it's 51% plus probability, but I think it's the most probable because of the inability of Parliament and government to agree the response at the moment. So if an amendment in Parliament can be put forward that, for example, commands the government to go back and request an extension to the Article 50 period, maybe, I would think there is a majority in that for Parliament. But an extension to do what? And that's the EU point. You're not just going to give an extension to just sit there and argue amongst yourselves for another 6 months. You need to come up with a proposal of what you want. Because from the outside, the UK doesn't know what it wants. So, yeah. I think they'd either go no deal or another referendum, but you know, she could pull the complete surprise and command another election. I don't know. Anyway, sorry?
Especially after the second wave.
Yeah, because at face value you would think they would favour the Conservative Party because they have a narrow lead in the polls. The Labour Party's official strategy is to want another election, so if she did it, they'd get the support in Parliament. But what then? I don't know. The YouGov poll suggests that he would still have a tight result.
We've got one last question
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
Is it possible they could get an extension until after the EU elections? And there might be a shift within the EU position?
I think it's possible they can get an extension. I think if they ask for it and they say, well, we want to have another referendum or we need time to put this agreement to the people, I think that it is likely that the EU would say yes, because I mean, nobody, you know, the EU doesn't want no deal. The UK government says it doesn't want no deal. It is a distinct possibility, yes.
I think the EU elections are in
May.
May, yeah.
I don't know how that would work in all practicality. I really don't. I mean, one suggestion, I don't know how serious it was that UK MPs in Westminster would double up as MPs for the duration of any extended period of membership. But I don't know how that would work in all practicality. But we're starting to enter somewhat absurd scenarios here because one of the rationales for going at the end of March was to avoid that position. And now we're in the situation whereby there's a distinct possibility we'll be in that position. Yeah.
Well, if nothing else, we live in very interesting times. Please join me in thanking Alex for what was a fascinating presentation, lots of data for us to remember and think about, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your time in Melbourne. It was great. Thank you.
Thanks.